Welcome to Sushi Bites. This is Family Tennis. Released on December the 11th, 1987 for the Famicom, exclusively in Japan. It is the fourth in Namco's very large family series of video games, and the first one to concentrate on tennis. Much like the previously spoken about Final Match Tennis, this game is also very technical and very fussy when it comes to actually serving a ball or hitting a ball. Yes, it's one of those. One thing that really bothers me about Family Tennis is either there isn't a dive function or I don't know how to use it. The fact that I can't dive for a ball makes it much harder to actually hit it. Trying to hit the ball from the back is part of my problem. I should be moving closer to the net, because actually that changes the way the ball is hit and changes the velocity of the ball as well as its direction. Opponents in Family Tennis tend to hit the ball pretty quickly, which makes it very difficult to hit the ball in enough time to react. So I don't really want to dwell on Family Tennis much longer, to be honest, because you basically get the idea. However, one cool thing this game does have is the ability to play on a Cosmo court. Not a clay court, not a grass court. Although they exist, you get the ability to play tennis in space. Now this is something that, although you don't return to space in the rest of the series, it's something they've kept true to. Following this game, the Family Tennis series continued to focus on the humour and the fun, as well as Namco references, and sort of tried to separate itself from being a straightforward tennis game like the rest of its contemporaries. So, we're going to have a very short look at the next Family Tennis game. And the reason why we're going to take a short look at this one is because it did actually get released outside of Japan. In fact, it got released in Europe. So, you know, I can't focus on it too much. Let's have a look now at Smash Tennis, released in 1993 for the Super Famicom and Super Nintendo. One thing you may notice is that the game has remained mostly the same since the Famicom original. The graphics have seen a nice update and have been made to be less realistic than in the original Famicom title, which is good in a way because I like the way it's already separating itself from reality as much as it can. But the game itself also has some interesting things it does, and some very cool tennis courts to play on in exhibition or world tour. And I'd like to show you a few of those now. So you've got your usual traditional tennis courts, but then you've got much cooler courts. Why not go playing tennis at a resort? There are people on the balcony watching you play, and a sprawling vista in the background. The ultimate holiday destination. Playing tennis at a beach resort. Well, forget the resort. Why not just play tennis on the beach itself? Because I tell you, there's nothing cooler than getting sand in your trainers while you're playing tennis. Perhaps you want to play tennis at a lodge, on the rooftop. Birds perched on either side, reacting to the ball and flying away when the ball hits the wall. But it doesn't stop there. Why not play tennis at a traditional Japanese shrine, including shrine maiden umpires? Yeah, cool, isn't it? It just humoured me. It's quite nice to see them do something different with it. But we've yet to talk about my favourite court type in the game. The last remaining court, and I tell you, if you have the balls to play tennis there, tennis balls, if you have the balls to play tennis there, you have my unfaltering respect. I'm talking about playing tennis on a mountaintop. On a mountaintop. I mean, that's what it's about, right? I like the way the ball just falls over the edge. It's a nice touch. I'd say there's some really great improvements over the original Family Tennis. Although it's still difficult to serve the ball, it is a little bit kinder, the timing's a little bit fairer. I also like that they've made up their own characters now, that are not made to resemble real-life tennis players. You can pick 4 of the same character, so that if you all want to play as the same character, you can. I absolutely love that in games. I hate it when they separate 1 character per person. If everybody wants to play as the same character, they should be able to. And I'm glad that this was also introduced in Super Family Tennis. So we had a quick look at Smash Tennis, actually probably longer than the amount of time it took to look at the other Family Tennis game. So let's jump to the final game in the Family Tennis series, and this is Family Tennis Advance for the, you guessed it, Game Boy Advance. This was released in 2002, exclusively in Japan, which still seems odd to me because the Game Boy Advance was at one point begging for titles. One addition I'm not sure if I'm pleased with it is background music during gameplay, so now each tennis court has its own accompanying music track. You can turn that off though if you want a more authentic tennis experience. But I like that this game is separating itself even more so from the serious tennis approach that the previous games in the series took. The characters are even more stylized, even more anime-ish. And the sprites are really good looking for Game Boy Advance. The serving again has been made a little bit more lenient. I actually found myself able to score more than I could in any of the other Family Tennis games. And although the timing is still a bit awkward for actually hitting the ball, and the collision seems a little bit off, I like what they've done with the place. Perhaps one of the really coolest additions in Family Tennis Advance is that if you serve the ball and it hits the top of the net and bounces over, it's not a fault. That's right, it's not a fault. You get to take that shot again, which is so lenient and so kind. Because the amount of times I actually do clip the top of the net, it happens so often that I'm glad that clipping the top of the net is not considered a fault. So, much like with the other games, the humour is there and it's been built upon yet again. There are now a multitude of courts available, each of them full of references to Namco titles. Let's take a look at those, because I tell you, they're the coolest part of the game. So here we have a traditional Japanese festival with paper lanterns, and even the taiko and drumsticks from Taiko no Tatsujin, or Taiko Drum Master as it was known in America. Now that is a nice touch, and actually a series we will one day focus on this show, but it's a while off yet. I quite like the background music here too, it's very fitting, it's very pleasant. Next up on the interesting courses we have a subway. A subway. Playing tennis in a subway. That is amazing. The benches and chairs to sit on in the subway have Namco franchises on their labels. You know, Pac-Man, Dig Dug, that sort of thing. It's a nice touch, but apart from that, there isn't really that much else in the way of Namco nods. It's just cool to see they put some effort into designing the courts. Next up, on the top of a feudal Japanese castle. Yes, tennis on top of a castle. How cool is that? Of all the ideas, this is probably the neatest one. How about tennis inside the castle? In one of its many rooms, at the top of the court, is the shogun or someone of equal importance, you know, maybe the king of Japan, or perhaps even some Yakuza warlord, I don't know. But it's like you're playing tennis for them. That's cool. Continuing the Namco Island stages, we have a forest. complete with wild animals, zebras, elephants. You're playing tennis for the animals. This is the natural evolution of the beach stage, and it's really quite pleasant to look at. The sand texture looks great, and I quite like the music here as well. Very funky, very jungly, very suiting of the fact that you're playing this tennis game alongside the animals. But that's not all, there's still one more really cool court to show. In fact, it's a tie-up between this and the castle for my favourite stage. Let's take a look at it. Japanese hot springs. I quite like this Namco Island series of stages.
Love 15.
You know how your character hovers back and forth when serving in most tennis games? Just sort of like standing still and floating? It happened in the other Family Tennis games. It happened in Final Match Tennis. But in Family Tennis Advance, they changed it. Yes, when you walk left and right, your character's feet move. Yes, success. Overall, I quite enjoy this series of games much better than the Final Match Tennis series of games, particularly because it's a little more inviting. Yes, it's still a very technical game, it's very fussy about serving and you don't get a bar showing you how well you are serving, but it's a lot more lenient. That's far more welcoming. I would actually say yes. If you can get hold of one of the games in this series, even the Super Nintendo game that got released outside of Japan, I would say go for it. They're really, really fun, well-developed, self-contained tennis games. Especially the Game Boy Advance title. Absolutely brilliant. I am shocked that this didn't get released outside of Japan. The Game Boy Advance was itching for quality titles at the beginning of its life, and this would have done great on the system and would have sold multiple copies, so it's confusing to me that it didn't get a release. Yeah, I say go for it. If you find this game anywhere or any of the other games in this series, check them out. Trust me, it won't be a waste of your time. This has been Sushi Bites, and until next time, tennis joke.